Welcome, everyone. I'm Anise Davis, Director of Engineering here at Meetup. I'm also co-organizer of GDGDC. I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining today's event on Finding Community in a Pandemic, a Success Story with Travis Lee. Let's move over to some guidelines before we get started. First, this event will be recorded. However, you will not appear in the video. Your audio will be muted throughout the entire event. And please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. Chat is just for some fun back and forth, but we'll actually be using the questions that you submit to the Q&A feature in order to answer your questions later on. The agenda, just a quick introduction. Then we're going to have a conversation with Travis Lee, and then finally we'll turn it over to you for any Q&A. Okay, so let's stop the slides and get into our conversation with Travis. Travis is a real estate professional in the DC area. He's the organizer of DMV Homeowners Community. From an early age, Travis had a passion for coaching and entrepreneurship. He's created businesses in web design, clothing manufacturing, property management. The list goes on. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Anise.
Really happy to have you. So let's jump right into the questions. Were you familiar with Meetup before you became an organizer?
Absolutely. So I had joined Meetup a couple of years ago. So I'd gone to some events and liked the platform and was definitely looking for opportunity to get more involved inside of it. Now, one thing I have to preface is that I noticed nowhere inside of that narrative that you mentioned that I'm your little brother. So like, what's up with that?
Yeah, I'm definitely very happy to have you here. And by the way, Mom says give her a call.
And she'd say that because I am her favorite, so I get it.
You
So
wish.
anyway, in regards to that too, so you had talked to me for a while. You've known me and forever since I've been born, and as a business owner, you were like, Travis, you got to check out this platform. There's a lot of opportunity, and of course, I sort of drug my feet initially, and you were able to convince me to check it out from a different perspective of becoming an organizer.
Right. So besides that initial conversation, was it that made you take the leap to become an organizer?
Absolutely. It was definitely COVID. So COVID turned a lot of things on their head, real estate being no exception, right? So there's a book I read, Who Moved My Cheese, that I always kind of reference and go back to. And during the pandemic, I was looking for where's the cheese going, because business had changed. It had gone from being face to face to the concern of not being able to, really face the consumer. And so I always thought, how can I take my business virtual, right? So I want to be virtual based and then physically enhanced, where the physical takes a backseat to the virtual. And so I saw Meetup as an opportunity to really organize my business and take the platform online. And in addition, from a local perspective, real estate's really, really local. It's neighborhood, right? So there was a national kind of narrative and conversation. And for me, it was really important that on a local front, we're able to communicate and really say what we're seeing in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, because that's where I specialize. And also being a coach, I wanted to provide insights and opportunity to just lift the spirit, because things from an energy perspective were really low. And I thought this would be a great platform where eyeballs were for me to have that type of conversation.
Perfect. So what steps did you take before you started your group?
Absolutely. So it started with some market research, right? So I joined a couple of groups. I wanted to see how did they pivot to online and the virtual, what were they talking about? How were they engaging with their groups? I wanted to really just look at trends, right? And then from there, it was about creating a strategy. It was important to me to kind of have a system in place, because I didn't want, this Meetup platform to really be a burden. I didn't want it to really take away from my business. So it was important for me to strategize what's the best system and way to leverage Meetup as a platform and as a tool to be able to continue to do business, but really pivot to a new direction. And then it was really just outreach, right? So it was reaching out to the people that I was in relationship with and encouraging them to kind of join and get on the platform and support my group so that I was able to grow it and just have a deeper level conversation.
Very good. And did you do any additional marketing or you solely relied on the platform?
Yeah, so I did additional. I did a lot of like Facebook ads. I did things with Instagram. I did, some circle prospecting, which is basically when you call around a certain farm. So I use those as opportunities to really attract and introduce the organization as well as some of the things that were going to be discussed inside of my meetup group.
Perfect. Now, how long did it take from the time you became an organizer to when you actually hosted your first event?
Yeah, so it was about a month, and that was deliberate. So of course I could have moved a lot faster, but I really did want to make sure that I got into a couple of different groups just to get a sense of what was the structure, what was the conversation like, how did they pivot to the online platform, and in addition, I also just wanted to have opportunity to go out and be able to market. So I felt like a solid month would give me an opportunity, and a lot of times, and I'm guilty of it, unless there is some type of end date in mind, it can be really challenging to keep to your word. So I wanted to put an end date in mind. Parkinson's law, all work fills to, whatever the time is that's allotted. So I wanted to give myself a deadline and say, hey, by this point, I'm going to go live with an event. And I thought that that would be a reasonable amount of time to do it.
Perfect. Now, here's a question we didn't actually prepare, but be honest, were you nervous to host your first event?
Absolutely, I was. So by nature, I'm a private person, right? So if you look at my Facebook page, I may post like once every 2 or 3 years. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit here in a platform and have people listen to me that I don't know. And are they going to interact? Is it going to be a bunch of blank screens? Like, what is that going to look like? And yet I saw it as an opportunity to be uncomfortable and to really shift and pivot my business, right? So I think for a person that's a business owner, there's always those horror stories. I don't want to be Radio Shack. I don't want to be Blockbuster, right? Like I want to be the Netflix. I want to be the person that kind of saw it coming and went where it made the most sense in business. So I was nervous, but at the same time, it was really exciting to understand that at least from a real estate arena, this was really untapped territory. So it was a great opportunity to get market share and get in early and to create a brand around the platform.
Wonderful. So how did it go? Like, what was your first event like? Was there anything that you did to get prepared? Share that with the rest of us.
Sure. So I mean, it was incredible. So it was nice because it was an intimate setting where I was able to converse and like really get a pulse on the market, the local market. What are people thinking about? What are they worried about? Where are they in that process concerning real estate? And so it was a really candid, honest discussion. So that went really well. I had received some really great feedback. As a business owner, leads and clients are really the lifeblood of an organization. And so even with having just that one meetup, I've had several people that have reached out since then and said, hey, can we have a conversation and can we schedule time to talk in more detail about my situation? So that was really exciting because it was interesting that even after the meetup was over, I started having additional people that joined the meetup group. So that went really well. And it also gave me an idea of where people were, right? So again, we talk about national, right? And I want to go like kind of micro and not macro. So I wanted to see locally, what were some of the concerns? What were the things that people had on their mind as a real estate professional? How can I show up to support people where they are? And I thought it gave me a really good understanding of like some market research and just a more intimate understanding of kind of what people were thinking about.
Okay, very nice. Now that sounds amazing, but were there any challenges that you had to face as part of this? Like, what did you do to kind of overcome those challenges if you did face some?
Absolutely. So there were some challenges. So number one, I'm one of those people that call it the Facebook. So I'm like, when it comes to technology, I'm not as savvy as the programmer. And so for me, I was a little concerned initially of how can I get Meetup to talk to other platforms, right? So if I wanted to do like video calls or if I wanted to do marketing and campaigns, are they going to play nice and talk well? And then of course I was kind of concerned about how do I create a safe environment? I started reading and hearing these horrible stories about people that were trolling and joining inside of groups. So I was concerned and I wanted to make sure I protected the integrity of the group and I provided a safe atmosphere where the focus could really be on the topic and not necessarily on having to police the entire experience. So, so those were challenges. I mean, in addition, I think it was really also tempering my expectation, right? So it'd be awesome to have your first meetup group and have, 1,000 people attend. And yet my concern was, well, what happens if it's just me and my wife on the other end? Because I'm like, hey, please join. So that way at least one person's on this conversation, right? And so I was a little concerned, but fortunately we had a pretty good turnout. And again, I had more people that joined after I actually hosted the event.
Okay. And did as many people show up as you thought?
So not as many as I had hoped, but fortunately I am looking to play the long game, right? So there's a book, The Infinite Game, Simon Sinek, the author of Start With Why. And inside of it, he talks about how important it is to have an infinite mindset, not a finite mindset if you're playing a business game. So the way I thought about it was this would be an incredible opportunity to farm. And for those that may not understand farming, farming from a business perspective is when you go out and you cast a wide net of seeds. So you plant a bunch of seeds, you create some buzz, and the intention is, you start to reap later on. So it's not going to be an immediate turnaround. And when you set that expectation, it gives you an opportunity to enjoy the process because you're not tied to what's the ROI? Did I get a return? Did I make money from that one thing or it didn't work? But you're thinking long term, doing this for the next 3 to 6 months to a year, how is that going to help shape and change my business as well as my brand as it goes online?
Right. Okay. Awesome. What are some tips that you can share for first-time organizers?
Yeah, so I think number one, I would definitely say start out with a checklist in advance of the event. So that way, not only because it helps you stay organized, but for me, I'm always thinking leverage, right? So as I'm working with business owners, whether they're inside of real estate or they're in other industries, what you realize is the business is really the system, right? So if you have a really solid system, it allows you to be able to scale and pretty much replace yourself. So by having that checklist, you're able to create a system where now it doesn't become a burden. Because that was my concern of how much of an investment of time is this going to take to get the platform up and running and to host these events. And as you have this checklist and you're building out that system, it really makes it more seamless because then you can kind of replace yourself and have a person step in and you can just audit the process to make sure that it works. In addition, I would say you want to make sure you do some dry runs. So again, I had the wife on another laptop, like, hey, how does this look? How's the lighting? How's my makeup? Just making sure that I present it the way that I wanted it to look. Because again, I'm not as sophisticated when it comes to technology. So I wanted to make sure that the systems work really well. And in addition, I would just say, be prepared, right? So this is the type of thing where I would recommend 20 to 30 minutes before, you have your event, you should be working out the kinks. If you're doing any type of slideshows or slide decks, it's important to make sure that those are queued up, that they're working appropriately. And in advance of the meeting, one of the things that I think made the most sense is that I really took a pulse of the audience, right? So the people that join the group, I have a questionnaire that automatically goes out to them, just so I can get a sense of what's their level of sophistication when it comes to home ownership. I want to make sure that I'm conversing with people where they are and for what's important to them. So by knowing your audience, I think it gives you that confidence of, I know how to tell her a message that's going to work for the people that are engaged and that have joined this group.
Right. And I really want to echo your sentiments around having a checklist and doing a dry run. Even for this event, we talk to each other all the time, but we
Yeah.
still had a checklist that we went through. We did 2 dry runs to make sure
Mm-hmm.
we had everything organized. We had slides involved. There was music. So there is an amount of preparation that goes into helping to make these events successful. So thanks for sharing those tips with us.
Absolutely. I think for most people, like if you don't have a background in like marketing or event coordination, it can be really daunting. So I think by having that checklist and doing it in advance, right? So if you're waiting 30 minutes before to make sure things are working, the adrenaline kicks in and that helps alleviate the opportunity to be creative. And that's important for these type of events. You want to make sure that you're creative, that you're organic, So I feel like doing it far enough in advance, you can have that logical piece of the brain kick in before the emotion gets involved, and just ensure that everything's in line to make it as smooth as possible.
Right. So, has there been any impact on your business since starting the Meetup group, hosting your first event? Is it maybe the way you think differently? Like, what is it that has changed?
Sure. So I think there's been tangible and intangible, changes and benefits, right? So for the tangible, I think I'm creating a tribe, right? I'm creating a database. I'm creating an ecosystem for people to be able to plug in where I can support them, not just for real estate, buying, selling, investing, but other components that are important to them, right? Because I have a coaching platform. So this gives me that opportunity. So it's nice to be able to use the technology, right? Because technology is a disruptor. And the cool thing is that the people that take advantage of it and really buy into the technology first are the ones that get to take advantage of the market share. They get their unfair share. So I think there's been benefit when it's come to that. Now for the intangible, I think mindset is also a really cool one. So again, for real estate, it's been such a, shake hands, rub shoulders and elbows. Like it's got to be face to face. You can't do technology; it doesn't work. And it's interesting that technology has really retrained how we connect with each other. And so it really opened up for me the idea of, wow, like how many other things are there in other industries that now I can bring into my business and organization, where even though it hasn't been done that way, could transform the way business is done. So there's a quote someone said is, don't do it the best that you can do it the best that it can be done. And so that makes me think sometimes we have to step outside of our norm. And I
Yeah.
think through this platform and through the group and through Meetup and technology in general, it's given me an opportunity to see like where else are we doing things in a way that we're doing it just because it's always been that way and not because it's the best way to actually do it.
Awesome. What other pointers or advice do you have for first time organizers?
Number one, I would say get started, right? So in coaching agents, there's a lot of really cool ideas that never materialize. And the biggest reason is because people expect perfection. And so I would start by saying, give yourself grace and give yourself permission to mess it up royally. Just give it, just go for it, right? Like I think, again, it gives you an opportunity to experience and to build before the mind gets involved and gives you all the reasons why it won't work and this won't help me and, this is not going to work out. So I would say, number one, get started. Number two, I would say really have an infinite mindset, right? So that goes back to the farming. Imagine being a farmer and you plant something and then the next day you go back and say, well, what's grown? If it didn't grow, I'm pulling out the seed and it didn't work, right? But when you think about it from a long-term perspective, you really give yourself permission to organically grow and foster an environment that's going to work for you. And you're not disappointed if you have a Meetup group where initially it doesn't take off immediately. The next thing I would say is really know who you are. This is important because in any type of business, a person buys into you first. So you got to know who you are, and all your quirkiness. And if you're just this outgoing person that's just going to jump around the screen and that works for you, then go do it, right? But if you're more relaxed and introspective, there's an audience for that. And I think in real estate as well as in business in general, the really cool thing about it is that anyone can be successful. It doesn't matter what type of personality you have. All you have to do is create an environment where your personality flourishes. And that's what I think is really awesome about the Meetup group is that I get to really showcase my personality. And if a person doesn't like it, they're going to check off very quickly. But for the people that are there, right, like they're there for a reason and it's really digging into who you are. So I think that's a really important thing to do. And then next, I would say, find a way to add some humor to it. Like we all need a laugh, right? Everybody's has something that they can be stressed about, something that's going on in your personal life. There is no perfect world or perfect life, right? So if you're able to give a person just an opportunity for a few minutes to just feel like they're connecting, especially when you've been cooped up, right? I'm in a townhome with a wife and two kids, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. So it's cool that when you step into this type of platform, it gives you that feeling of community again. And I think that's really important more than ever right now.
Yeah, wonderful. And so, Travis, when is your next event?
It's coming up, and you have been yelling at me and sending me texts like, "What are you doing? When's the next?" So it's coming up. So I'm planning a couple of different topics, and to that point of the checklist, I also think it's really cool to, in advance of the meeting, have a couple of different topics and things that you're considering, and then kind of bounce it off of people. So there's some really interesting perspective I have concerning real estate, concerning home ownership, concerning coaching, where I want to make sure that I engage the topic in a way that's going to resonate with people and
Yeah,
really highlight who I am as a person and how I see the world.
I can't wait. I really enjoyed your first event. I'm excited to attend the second one. I learned a lot, and just keep working at it. And thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. Now,
Absolutely.
before we switch over to Q&A, I'm going to share my screen to do a quick recap of what Travis has shared so far with us. So first, before starting your group, these are some things that he recommends. Conducting research to learn more about like what's happening in your local area, maybe join a few other groups and see how they're successful or not. Create some type of strategy, think the long game. Market your group. He used other social platforms in order to get the word out. And then he also did some member outreach by means of a survey where he learned more about where they stood as far as their knowledge or expertise in that particular topic. The second thing that I thought was really powerful is the ideas around hosting a successful event. First of all, knowing your audience, having a system or process in place, having that checklist, so important. We have so many things going on all the time. Often, as meetup organizers, we have full-time jobs that we have to tend to, family, etc. So having that checklist is really, really critical to making sure you don't forget anything, enlisting the help of others, and then having that dry run, checking sound quality, technology, etc. And then finally making sure you hop on the call early so that you can work out any technical issues prior to actually getting started. Once again, thank you so much, Travis. Now let's go over to the Q&A. Okay, so let's see. First, Donna asked, Travis, can you dive deeper into what elements you chose to implement in your system? I guess this is for like the process in creating your successful event.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. So I think the very first thing I did was really to take market research to figure out exactly what is the topic that for me made the most sense. What do I know the most about, and what is it that people typically are going to ask, or what do they want to know? So once I had an opportunity to figure out the topic, the next step was creating a slide deck and creating really the language and the narrative behind here's the major points that I want to make sure are mentioned inside of that topic. That market research point is also really critical, like really knowing who the audience is, how do they want to be communicated with, like typically what's their attention span, is this a 1 hour conversation, or is this like a 15-minute, let me give you a sneak peek and then let's move on to something else to keep your attention. And then after that, it was more about the marketing of the meeting. So because I'm in real estate, I understand how powerful leads are. So it's like a funnel, right? So the funnel starts off really, really wide, and then it starts to narrow. And I think the same thing when it comes to creating a meetup, group and organization that works really well. It's how do I get the most amount of people in initially to at least see like, hey, this is what I'm offering. And then for those people that, see the value in it and that are my client, it makes sense for them to continue to proceed in that direction. And then the other thing is really memorialize it. And that's the part that I think a lot of people may not necessarily do, where it's like, okay, as I went through the process, I made sure every single step of the way, I wrote down, here's what I did. And then I argued, why did I do it this way? Is there another way it could have been done? Where was this taken from? What was the response of it? And then really measuring the results. So afterwards, having, opportunity for people to give feedback, seeing what do I expect to happen based on the group and the meetup that I did. Now, because I am analytical by nature, one of the things I also did was I looked at conversion ratios. And what I mean is inside of the real estate industry, it's really math, right? And business, math is the language of business. So when you know your numbers and you know the math, then all it is really plug and play. So I was able to look at, based on the attendance level and based on the response, what should I be getting as a conversion inside of that? And if I wasn't getting that number, what are some of the things that could have potentially caused that not to happen? So that each time I'm able to continue to refine and create an efficient, effective method where it starts to become predictable. If I know, 40 people get on the call, this is what that should trickle down to in either business or future opportunities to have discussions and conversations. So those are just some of the things, just really looking back introspectively, that I did, that I think moving forward, I will continue to do that, because as you create that type of system, now you can replace yourself, right? And now I can leverage it and put another person in place. And because I know the math and the conversion, I can hold the system accountable to the results. And it doesn't just have to be me that did it.
Yeah, I love that. Business is math. So stay in school.
And
Okay.
I did all form math in school. Like, how about that? I wasn't the straight A student like a big older sister I know, but yeah.
So Mike asked, what have been the advantages of using the Meetup platform?
I would say the advantage for me is that I get to create the tribe and I get to create the narrative. So in business, there's always going to be disruptors, right? There's always someone that's trying to take your clientele. Like, there's always some new shiny thing, some new way to do it. And it's not a bad thing, right? It just is. There's always a refinement. So the advantage to me is that I get to create a space where I can build a moat around my tribe, my clientele, and then basically systematically converse with them where I become that brand of choice. So studies have shown that people can normally only hold 2 brands in their mind at one time. If I say Coke, what would you say?
Pepsi.
Yeah, I mean, right? Like, it is, right? It's just one of those things. And that's everyone. So if you're not number 1 or number 2, you're really not top of mind. And then you're competing, with all the different noise that's trying to pull your business away. So for me, the advantage is that I create a platform where I can become the brand. I can be top of mind. I can create the story and the narrative. And then real time, I can pivot, right? If I find that right now my clients aren't really worried about, purchasing investment properties, they're more concerned about how do I create equity or create cash from my current asset, that would be good to know. Whereas if I'm just marketing, it's a one-way conversation. So I don't really have a chance to know, is this what really matters to the consumer? But when you create a platform and you're in conversation with that platform, you then become what the consumer wants. And it's not like you just have to do what I say. It's more like, I'm going to refine my business to meet you where you are and what's important to you.
Perfect. Next, Garth asked, based on what you've learned so far, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? The most obvious is I would have started a couple of years ago. That's definitely what I would have done differently. And I would have been in more groups and really paid attention to how did they build these massive platforms? What were some of the things that they did? That'd be the first thing I would do. Second is I would be more consistent. So this is something I shared with a coaching client before. When you have one message, and let's say it's one message every month, it's got to be perfect because you have one shot, right? If I had 2 messages a week, I could kind of flub a couple of messages and it still be okay because I have more at bats, right? I have more opportunity to continue to refine it. And because people get to see you long term, they start to accept who you are. They get to know you, right? And that's what people want, especially where we are today, where it feels so disconnected. There's still that feeling of wanting to know and belong. And so I think the more that you do meetups and the more that you do these events, the more that a person gets to see who you are and they see you as a real person. It's not a person that's just standing on a soapbox saying, I'm an expert and I know it all. They see you as a real person. And when a person sees you that way, they have more grace, they give you more forgiveness, and they help build who you become. So it's constantly an ebb and flow. It's a conversation, right? It's dynamic. You and I have had some incredible conversations over the years. And what you'll notice is the conversations start to evolve and grow for every aspect of your life as you continue to the next level. And I think Meetup is the same way. Like, the conversations get to change because as your business grows or as your clientele changes, you start to morph with that. And that would be one thing that moving forward, I'm going to say is really important for me. I don't want it to be perfect because I'm not. I want it just to be as many opportunities as I can to provide value and impact other people. And I think having more meetups gives you that opportunity to do that.
Okay, thanks, Travis. Someone asked, can you tell us more about what specifically you do in real estate?
Absolutely. So I'm a local real estate agent. So I support people who are buying, selling, investing in real estate. I'm also a certified business coach. So typically I support real estate agents and taking their business to the next level. So I take agents that are brand new and I help them build actual businesses and brands around who they are and what's important to them. In addition, I'm also a real estate investor. So I'm very passionate about real estate, right? So I did 10 years property management. I've done commercial management. I've done retail, residential. Every aspect really of real estate excites me. You know, Anise, you'll remember since I was a kid, you know, I've always said one day I want to build it with my name on it. So for me, it's being systematic about understanding everything about real estate and what's behind the curtain, and then offering that to my client. That's the most important thing to me is how do I demystify real estate in such a way that anyone feels comfortable and confident that they can step in and do the same thing? Because I feel like for a very long time, there's been this veil of you got to have a whole bunch of money. And if you're not sophisticated, and that there's so much opportunity that I think the more that people understand it, the more that it's going to transform and really support people in building a big life that matters to them.
Right. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Janera asked, how did you send out your survey at the end of the meeting?
Sure. So what I did is I just did DMs. So it's probably a smarter way to do it. But again, I'm not as technically savvy. So it was more of a, you know, hey, thanks for joining the group and being part of the conversation. Please give me some insight. What did you enjoy about it? What could I have done differently? What would you like to see in the future? What is it that your colleagues and your friends and the people in your life, what are you talking about right now? What are your concerns? What's the conversation that's not being had, or where's there opportunity to provide additional clarity where you're like, hey, I've always wondered about this, but I don't know what to trust, right? Because I feel like the more that we become digital and virtual and now global as an economy, the more information there is, and most of it's competing. So it's like, who do you believe? Like, what is it? And so I just followed up directly with a separate email to each person. And honestly, now that I think about it, I'm glad I did it that way because it wasn't some system, some bot that just sent this, you know, generic message out to everyone, but it was actually me directly engaging and being able to reference like, hey, I love the question that you asked, or, you know, thank you so much for joining. I remembered you saying, and it makes it more personal.
Perfect. Barbara asked, can you give us any pointers for non-business meetup groups like interest groups or hobby groups or language groups?
Absolutely. So what I would say is, again, know who you are. And then there's a quote, what's most personal is most universal. And I love it. And what that simply means is what relates to you, what you find to be important, there's a group of people out there that feel the exact same way. And they're just waiting for someone to raise their hand and say, let's put you all together and let's have a conversation, or let's engage in an activity that we're passionate about. So again, I would just say get started, right? If there's something that you're very passionate about, and let's say you already have a group of people offline in a physical arena that you're conversing with, bring it to an online platform, because when you do that, it allows you an opportunity to be able to expand and scale. And now you can get insights and you can get experiences from people from around the world or in other geographical areas where there'd be no other way for you to have that same level of connection other than the group and the platform that you created.
Perfect. And Gretchen asked, do you plan to fall into a regular cadence for your meetings? If so, do you have thoughts on what that would be?
Absolutely, I do. So for me, what I think the cadence may look like is every 2 weeks, because I feel like it gives me enough opportunity to be able to market, brand, and then it also gives me a chance to cycle through subjects. So my intention isn't to be a one-trick pony where every single meetup is the same exact conversation, right? And I don't want it to be so far in advance that I can't pivot as real-time information comes in and there's news or there's some other pressing subject that I want to make sure I touch on. So I feel like every 2 weeks gives me enough opportunity to be able to ship when I need to, and at the same time have ample time to actually prepare to make sure that it's an impactful meeting where I can get the most amount of people there.
Okay, perfect. Danielle asks, states, I recently took over as organizer of a meetup group and I'm working on scheduling my first online event. Do you have any advice or other ways to move forward connecting with people who are already in the group?
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Congratulations to you. I'm a little jealous. Like I didn't have that luxury. Here's what I recommend you do. Do a video about you. Like give people an opportunity to know who are you, what matters to you, what are some things that you see, when it comes to the direction of the meetup group, what are some ways that you're planning to take that group. Find a way to create some type of survey where you can get input from them. And then I say you really start with an intimate conversation, right? Like I think, again, where we are right now, I think more than ever, people want to feel like they belong, right? And they want to feel like I can have a conversation with someone. Like even if you're home and you have your family, there's that feeling of, I want different personality types. I want different perspectives. Like how can I get that in this type of environment? So I think you can really use this as an opportunity to introduce yourself. And then from there, really learn about who are the team members, right? Learn about like, what are your specialties? Where do you come from? What brought you to this group initially? What would keep you here? What would it take for this to be an organization that you would want to invite other people to join in as well? And I think having that real conversation when you come from contribution, people will want to see you succeed. A lot of times, and from my opinion, is that we want to feel like we're right and that we're the expert, right? So I don't want people to know I don't know all the answers, because then they won't like me or trust me. But it's really the inverse. When people feel like you're coming from contribution and you're looking for collaboration, they show up different because they want to see you succeed, because it happens so rarely that a person can raise their hand and say, I'm very successful, but I still don't know it all. And I'm okay with that, right? Because it gives me an opportunity to learn. So I would say initially, make it about you. Let them peek into your life and what's important to you. And then give them that same favor of, tell me about you. Like, who are you? How did you join this group? How long have you been here? What's been your engagement level? What are some of the meetings that you have absolutely loved? What are some of the things that didn't work out well for you? And then really just get that feedback to pivot and make that meeting something that's going to be instrumental to the people that are in that group.
Yeah, +1. That's great advice. Mike asked, what have been your time, cost, and money? So let's get down to
Mike is
numbers.
getting into it. All right, where's my P&L statement at? All right, Mike. Okay, so I would say, here's what's interesting. When it comes to the time cost, I've actually gotten time back, which you would think would be the opposite. Here's why. And again, I can't touch on every industry, but when it comes to real estate, it's normally a one-on-one conversation. Person says, hey, Travis, I want to sell my house. I want to buy a house. I meet with them directly. We take an hour, we dig in deep, we talk about their situation. I walk them through the process. I support them, which is great. And I've enjoyed doing it. I had an industry icon one day tell me, and this was a while ago, he said, what you need to do is find a way to get everybody in the room at the same time. And I said, you're absolutely nuts. Nobody wants to talk about real estate with other people around, and it's personal, and then they feel like they can't ask these questions, all these different things. And thanks to COVID, I've been able to do that. So I've gotten time back. So instead of it being these one-off or one-on-one conversations, what it's become is, let's have a community of conversation where it's a safe space where we can talk about whatever's on your mind concerning real estate, and I'll be able to support you from there. So I've gotten time back. And when it comes to the costs, there are so many really, really inexpensive online ads that it's ridiculous. I gotta, pay for one less pizza a month. And I can put that into my business. So I feel like thanks to technology, you can leverage it in such a way that it's not a lot of money out of pocket, and then you can scale it. So instead of me having one conversation 100 times, I can have 100 conversations one time by having everybody in that room.
Okay, nice. And Denise asked, what has been the ratio of people who sign up to your meetup and the ones that actually attend the event? I know you only had one event, but maybe
Sure.
share that.
Now I'm gonna have to break out a calculator. Come on, like work what you said, Denise. I mean, I'm
Business
sweating
is
over here.
math, remember? You said business is math.
Yeah. So I think ideally you're probably looking at I'd say a 10-to-1 ratio, somewhere around there. So maybe 10%, 10 to 20%, which is pretty much in line. So here's what's interesting, especially about real estate. And again, every industry is different. For real estate, when it comes to leads and conversion, it's normally a 1 to 3% ratio. That's it. Meaning that if I talk to 100 people, there may be 3 that actually have some interest in real estate. And out of those 3, about 70% of that's going to fall out. So I have to have a ton of conversations, right, to get one client that ends up getting keys or selling their home. The cool thing about like meetup platforms is even if a person doesn't attend, right, there's some drips and some follow-ups and things that you can do where I can still engage you and have a conversation of, hey, I'm sorry I missed you. I know that you RSVP'd. Give me an idea. Is there a better topic that may be more important to you to get you to come along? And it may not be for them. I know how many times I've signed up for things and then I just, I was busy and I couldn't do it. And basically I've been able to, because of having that captured information, they've been able to follow up with me and continue the conversation. So even if I didn't join that meeting, there was still an opportunity for them to plug and, for whatever the business is that they're doing.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Travis, for your time and energy and sharing all this great advice with us. Hugs and kisses to the family from me.
Absolutely.
You all can view a recording and recap of this event on our Community Matters blog at meetup.com/blog. That's meetup.com/blog. Thanks again for joining us today.
Now, one quick thing before you log off. When we were kids, I did not break that vase. Like, I need you to say it in front of everybody. This is being recorded, right? Because you blame me for that one. Okay, whatever. I love you, okay?
Totally did. Love you too.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.